essentially, because we're talking about maritime activities here. Shipping, fishing, exploration for oil and gas, for mineral resources, everything that you do in sea. The thing is, worldwide, in other countries, in every other maritime nation, it has been recognized that these issues are not immediately settled by the establishment of maritime boundaries. The problems still continue because you're talking about water. Water is a medium. No? It's not like land where if you leave something on land, it will stay there until somebody else moves it. In the water, you put something on the water, it will move on its own. or the resources there, for example, fish, they're mobile and they do not care where your boundaries are. So the problems of fishing, intrusions, competing oil and gas, shipping, possibilities of pollution, they will still be there. And we will still need to deal with them with each and every country with whom we have a problem. The boundary will not settle any of it, no? Because none of these resources, none of these activities actually pay much attention to these boundaries, which in the end are really all imaginary. Even the boundaries on the land practically are imaginary and arbitrary. And the only reason why they become concrete is when we put a fence, a concrete structure, or when we put people there to defend them, to guard them. But obviously you cannot do that in water, no? Unless you have all the riches of the world, and even then it will be difficult. If I may give an example, when the United States and Canada had a problem in the Gulf of Maine, no? The competition between Canada and the US was fishing over lobster. It was a small area in the East Coast. They went to the ICJ. The ICJ made a decision and actually drew a boundary that neither of them really liked because it was different from either of their positions. No? And after the ICJ decision was rendered, they found out, they realized that they still had the same problems of fishing, competition, intrusions that really was the source of that original case, the original reason why they filed it in the first place. So now, they have, despite the boundary, they still established a commission to manage the fishing separately from the boundary, regardless of the boundary. A similar situation arose with respect to China and Vietnam. They had a boundary, they established a boundary in the Gulf of Tonkin just in 2002, I think. And despite that boundary, they continued negotiations, no, in order to establish fishing zones and buffer zones around the boundary because they realized that fishermen still went right through the boundaries they agreed upon. So we will still be back to that same position.
Okay. Satisfied with the answer? No follow-up? No follow-up. Test, please.
Salamat, Director J. I was very intrigued by what you presented. Ang tanong ko lang, gusto ko mag-isip ng parang bata. Ba't ba tayo nag-aagawan? Anong karapatan natin mag-agawan pa samantalang ganun din palang kalulutasan ng problema? Hindi palang magiging malutas. It's been years, hundreds of years, even historically, question of sovereign rights, question of historical rights, question of claims, etc. Makapapagulo din pala, bakit hindi nalang joint exploration na this belongs to the world and nobody else's political claim. Hindi pa mas magandang solusyon kaya yan? Has this been explored? Katulad nga ng binigay niyong ehemplo between Canada and the US, in the end, lumabas, hindi naman pala talaga problema eh. Bakit ba talaga? Ano ba ang pinag-uugatan ng mga claims?
Okay. Well said.
Many times the question of a child is the most difficult one to answer, no? Kasi it's so simple and it also speaks to truth, no? It's true. What are we fighting over, no? I think this is where you see an example of the problem with a purely land-based perspective, no? Kasi sa lupa, we think that all our problems are solved by just putting up a fence. If you don't like your neighbor, lagyan mo ng bakod para hindi mo na nakikita yung mukha niya. The thing is, in the oceans, it's not that simple. You cannot fence the oceans. It's that simple. Ganun lang talaga. And that's why elsewhere in the world, when you talk with maritime experts, you talk with law of the sea experts, no, and anybody who deals with maritime boundary issues, they will always be discussing maritime cooperation, no? Because they know that drawing a boundary does not solve the problem. No? And that is probably where we are at now, at present. No? The current government believes strongly, di ba, yung position na good fences make good neighbors, that is the current perspective. If we draw a boundary, it will solve our problems, it will be the durable solution, na tawag nila. What I'm saying, as somebody who has actually studied maritime issues, it is not a durable solution. A boundary, a maritime boundary especially, will not be a durable solution simply because you cannot fence the ocean. No? Every problem will still be there afterwards.
Okay. Roy Mabasa, please.
I'd like to address this to Professor J because I'm quite, I heard several times about the JMSU agreement that the previous administration has signed with China. It seems that you are now, most of us are in favor of cooperation. That's what Chito was saying earlier. We engage China more on cooperation, and Jay is saying now that cooperation is the name of the game. Well, are we supporting the JMSU in that case, sir?
I think that again, worldwide, if you look at the training and if you look at the philosophy behind management of the marine areas, cooperation activities like the JMSU are always offered as a solution, no? Because it is only through cooperation that you can actually govern and regulate activities in the ocean. No? Simply drawing a boundary will not do it because they can easily ignore it. But if you have cooperation between the states that actually conduct those activities on what they can and cannot do, that's the only way that you can have an effective management of the oceans. The JMSU, the principle behind the JMSU, which is cooperation, maritime cooperation for extraction of resources in an area which is actually common to all. And I think everyone will agree that the South China Sea is a common area among all Southeast Asians and China. That in principle is good. No? That is a favorable outcome. The problem, however, is that JMSU, the way it was crafted and negotiated, as was already stated, no? It was really tainted. No? It just suddenly came into being without any prior discussion, without any prior vetting, no, about what its possible impacts could be. And I think that is why it really fell from favor. No? But if you were an outsider, like if you were from Singapore, if you're Europe or American, they're always asking, why, what's wrong with it? No? What's wrong with having cooperation when that is what everybody should be going for? They do not see really the backstory of the JMSU, which I think everybody would agree really was problematic. There really was a problem with how it came into being. No? But in principle, a cooperative agreement really should be the way to go for the whole South China Sea. My own problem with the JMSU really, aside from the backstory, is really an issue of yung reciprocity.
Yeah.
No? Kasi nga, it really looked like we were the only ones giving up an area for joint activities. Why did the other side not have an area that we would also be joining in? Kasi reciprocity is also an indication of how equitable the agreement is. No? Cooperation is good for as long as it is equitable. No? Yung hindi nadidihado yung members. And those are the things nga that did not come out of this JMSU because of the way it was negotiated, because of the way it just suddenly appeared.
So that would mean that a new or revised JMSU could provide a good start or headway between the Philippines and China.
It could, but you have to consider nga, no, given our experience before, no, that we should be smarter. No, we should be much more careful now about these kinds of agreements. No? I think Senator Leti talked about yung about power now. We know that there is hard power, and then which is by force using the backup of your military might. No, And then China has been the one using so-called soft power, using your economics. No? I think what we need to find now is a means of smart power, meaning we may be a small country, we may have only a little bit of influence, but if we use it strategically at the right point, at the right time, then we can still pursue our interests. And that is something that probably eludes us at this point. Yun yung wala siguro sa atin. Ang dami-dami nating resources human resources, and dami-dami nating mga Pinoy na talagang maraming alam makakatulong dito. But we're not able to harness it now. If we only could harness it, then we can probably have the confidence, we can probably have the strength, no, to actually negotiate and deal with China on an equal footing. Hindi yung laging feeling inferior tayo, feeling weak tayo, no? But we really need to work on it. That's why we need to know more about the law of the sea. That's why we need to know more about the maritime aspects. That's why we need to know more about being an archipelago. Because that is the only place we can find this smart power. That's the only way, really. If we use our limited resources very carefully, very strategically.
Okay. Yes, Senator Shahani, before we entertain
I
the
just
last
would
question.
like to say that in the JMSU, according to inner sources, DFA and the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Justice were not consulted. On maritime issues, there should be a legislative, executive, judiciary consensus. And in fact, I've been saying that in Malacanang, there should be a judiciary, legislative, executive sort of body advising the president on all of these constitutional issues. See, it cannot just be bilateral for the sake of cooperation and then what we're eaten up. I mean, we must know what we're going in for. And this is really territory. So you cannot just say, why don't we just cooperate? Cooperate with what? Before you know it, the Republic of the Philippines might disappear. Because territory and sovereignty are important. Otherwise, we're not a republic. We will just be citizens of what? Papua New Guinea or Fiji.
Okay. And we have to take into account climate change. Mentong, for the last question.
Yeah, pinasok mo yung question, nahirapat na tuloy ako kasi magko-comment eh. But it was mentioned that the Philippines has to assert itself and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the discussion on historical claims and so on. You see, the problem with us is we discuss patriotism, nationalism, and so on. We object to China's historical claim and so on. But the Philippines gave up its historical claims on its territory in the 1987 Constitution, in the revision by the Constitutional Commission of Cory Aquino. So, marami tayong contradictions. We have a lot of contradictions we have to resolve. We talk about foreign policy. Do we have a Philippine foreign policy? While the world is already moving towards the BRICS, the multipolar world, we're still in the unipolar world. We are relating with one major power. And we have to all expand our understanding of geopolitics. What is the Monroe Doctrine of the United States of America? It's a declaration that South America, is, if you ask the Chinese now, is the lake of the United States of America. What about the UNCLOS and the Indian Ocean? Have we studied it? What is the attitude of India to the Indian Ocean issues?
Don't worry.
They're not accepting it also, di ba?
Uh-huh.
So, tama si Senator Shahani and everybody else on the panel. We have to expand our discussion of this and not limited to the question, for example, will the U.S. intervene? Paulit-ulit na lang yan. I don't care, and we as a nation should not care about the U.S. Damn them. They're the ones blocking our growth.
Okay.
Diba?
Well said, Mentong. All right. It's okay. No question then. But the question I will pose to our friends in the panel is, will the latest addition to the Philippine arsenal, which is a ship which will celebrate its golden anniversary, which will be much older than its captain, add color, or will it add fuel to the fire? What signal will it give China? Simulan natin kay Professor Richard.
Um, as much as I know, having museum relics on your military is not really going to send the best message. I think that our new acquisitions and our plans of new acquisitions, getting surplus vessels perhaps from the French, negotiating with the Koreans for more new aircrafts and whatnot, is saying something about how the Philippines is finally waking up to the fact that since our so-called formal independence, we really never work on our capability for minimum deterrence, but even below that, for minimum surveillance. In fact, if you look at the people,
Yes, please.
in fact, if you look at people who are on the front line, Philippine Coast Guard and Navy, they say that what we, first of all, we have to establish is our surveillance capabilities to know what is happening within the territories under our control. So I think that it's not sufficient, but it's a one step in the right direction, and I hope it will create the momentum for much more credible acquisitions. But there should be an element of urgency. We were supposed to get new vessels, corvettes, I think, from the Italians, but again, there's a change of plan. Perhaps we're going to get it from Koreans. I don't know. So I think the sense of urgency should be there with the Defense Ministry, and this should create a momentum towards better acquisitions. To develop what? Not to develop a military that can match the Chinese, that's impossible, but to develop a basic surveillance capability as far as our claimed territories is
So,
concerned.
Richard, with what you said, pardon me, did I get you right that the government is being consistent with its inconsistencies?
I think we have been inconsistent in the fact that we always make a statement towards, yes, we're going to modernize our military, starting with the Ramos administration, and this has never moved forward. But I think finally we are being consistent about sending across our alarm at how we feel that our military is decrepit and how we feel that we should develop that. I think we are developing that kind of consistency. And President Aquino has been very clear that they're going to allocate more funds to new acquisition. So I think that's a clear message. But definitely we're not going to match the Chinese in terms of conventional capabilities yet.
Of course, yes. Thank you very much, Professor Richard Heydarian. Professor J. Batungbakal, how do you look at all this?
One ship is not going to make a difference as far as I'm concerned. No? I mean, it's not the ship which will affect our subsequent relations with China now. It's what we say about the ship. No? It's the context in which we present the ship. And that's really what worries me more. No? Because we have been, yes, we have been saying consistently that we will modernize the armed forces, but have acted differently. And it seems like this year, as you know, we're in the same situation, especially when you consider the President's SONA. Parang biglang, that really raised a question in my mind. What was he saying about modernization? Given his comments about the fighter planes, that it is better, in a way, it's better spent on social programs. It's a valid point. But then to raise it after saying that we will modernize and acquire new aircraft, that really sends, again, mixed messages. So the arrival of this new ship probably is another opportunity for government to again say something about this whole idea. And yun nga, whatever it says is now about this ship, not the ship itself, is what will determine whether it will affect the relations with China.
Yeah, okay. So it's the manner of how we present the presence of the ship.
Yes.
Like, for example, this is not a warship, but be careful. It's aging and you may get tetanus, parang ganun, if you go anywhere near. But anyway, yes, Chito, being an objective media man that you've been for a long, long time, with all this happening, how do you look at our future? Will this ship make any difference in the country's image?
I'll put it in the context of what is usually a strategy that one should adopt in dealing with China or with any major power. It's basically using your two hands. On the one hand, deterrence. On the other hand, engagement. If you only focus on deterrence, then it will give a wrong message. You have to combine deterrence with engagement. In other words, how to show that you only mean this for defense, and there's no way that we intend to invade or pose a threat to China, by combining it with engagement so that you manage the dispute and explore, continue to develop trade, investment, and tourism and other areas of cooperation. So if you put it in that context, if you combine the two hands with your legal strategy, then I think we will be able to maintain a consistent message.
Now let's hear from Senator Leticia Ramos Shehani about her words of wisdom, considering her experience, her knowledge of the issues. How do you look at all this? Will a ship change the image of the Philippines, Madam Senator?
Well, what I really one of the things I wanted to show was comparison of the Chinese and the Philippine Navy. And we really look so pathetic. No, I mean, let's say, for instance, China has 248 personal carriers. You only have 24. No, I mean, it really is no comparison. But at least, I think our Navy is getting more attention now in a way that we didn't bother to pay any attention before. And this is part of our colonial policy. MacArthur was asked by Quezon to beef up the Philippine Army, not the Philippine Navy. The Americans wanted us to buy their cars from Detroit. This is why, I mean, now that we don't buy our cars from Detroit, but from Japan. I mean, Detroit has filed bankruptcy. Etc. I mean, we were the downgrading of the Navy was part of the colonial system. And this is why the Philippine infantry was always used to fight the insurgency. These insurrectos, you see, which the Americans said, when really they were our fellow Filipinos. Now this is the first issue of an external threat. This is really, so we don't really know how to act because we have been so used to fighting our own people. They were our enemies, Filipinos. That's what the Americans taught us. Now we have to unlearn that we have an external threat in the face of China. Well, we really have nothing. So I'm not going just to, poo-poo this thing. I mean, at least the Philippine Navy which used to be a mosquito navy, by the way. It is the weakest navy in ASEAN. Let's face it that way. So what else is new, members of the media? Why should we be so beating ourselves on the breasts when we know that we are a poor country? That's all we can afford. But I am happy that we do have this, at least the Alcaraz, which will survey our coast, you see, because that is what we need. We don't really know who are coming and who are going because our coastline is so much longer than that of the United States. So I received an invitation to greet this barko ng Republiko ng Pilipinas, no, Alcaraz, but I'm not going because it's so far away. And for an 84-year-old, that's a long trip. But if I were younger, I think I would go just to welcome it and to say, okay, I mean, if that's what we can afford. But it does not mean that we cannot continue to build up and really just fight in the same way that our heroes mounted that Philippine Revolution against Spain and succeeded almost against America. That's the spirit we need now, not this defeatist. And as Jay said, let's use smart power because power does not work anymore. We've learned so much. The world is more sophisticated. Middle East is sick and tired of despots. So is Africa. You see, this is a new world order. But middle powers like us should assert our rights. And we're not small. We're 110 million Filipinos, you see. So I think we should count our blessings and, I mean, thank the Lord that there is this new cutter. Of course, it's second-hand, but we can't afford first-hand anyway. Unless we build our own ships. By the way, that's what we need to do, Melo, to have the self-reliance to build our own ships, like the way the Indians built their own spaceships. Mm-hmm. Out of their own guts and raw knowledge. That's what we need now. Not whether America is a threat, China is a threat. What's the Philippines going to do anyway against external threats? That's foreign policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We say thank you to all our guests who shared their talent, their rich experience into what we had today. Thank you very much to each and every one.